Bite Club. If you like it, bite it.
It can be a casual conversation in the aisle when Darrell tells us when we can't find something, if we put these two things together, we'll have the same thing. It can come in a wine tasting or a seminar on a Saturday morning. You know, I'd heard of Darrell Corti. I first came to Sacramento in 1982, and like most of the rest of you, I was familiar with Darrell Corti and Corti Brothers. But it wasn't until about 7 or 8 years ago that I was in Monterey at the Masters of Food and Wine, and the architect of that event, a man named David Fink, who may be familiar to some of you, he was the head of Food and Wine at the Highlands Inn and general manager of Pebble Beach Resort, and now owns Lucas and Boucher and L'Auberge, 3 of the most famous restaurants in Carmel. And he said, "You live in Sacramento, do you know Darrell Corti?" And I said, "Well, I know of Mr. Corti." He said, "Let me tell you, that man is a treasure. He knows more about food than anybody in the United States." And I kind of, you know, it got my attention. And then Rick and I were at Slow Food Nation last Friday night. And we took a camera with us, and we wanted to get some testimonials from a few of the famous chefs that were there. And I was sitting there kind of interviewing them, not really doing much. And I'll never forget a man named Mark Tarbell, who's a celebrity chef in the Southwest, owns a famous restaurant in Scottsdale called Tarbell's. He said, "Darrell Corti knows more about food than anybody in the world." And then Marsha McBride said the same thing a few minutes later. She used to be a partner in Zuni Cafe. So I don't know if he knows more about food than anybody in Sacramento or Northern California or America or the world, but we have a diamond, an absolute treasure amongst us. And this institution must remain in some form at some location. And you know, Darrell is a very modest guy. All he ever says is, "I just want to be a grocer." And you know, I was talking to our founder at California Strategies, Bob White, about Darrell, and I want to acknowledge Bob, because when I went to Bob and said I'd like the firm to help with this project, he said, "Absolutely." He said, "Other than Arnold Schwarzenegger, no one in Sacramento transcends Sacramento like Darrell Corti." And I'll tell you, when Bob stepped in and sprinkled holy water on the project, all the able staff that have been working on it, you know, walked a little faster and worked a little harder. People like Tessa Barron. Where's Tessa? Tessa, many of you met her right out here in front of Corti Brothers, where she gathered thousands of signatures. And you know what was amazing is nobody turned us down. So anyway, this is a great celebration of the Corti family and Darrell Corti. And we've got a few good friends of Darrell's who we called, and like I said, nobody turned us down. And the first one who I want to introduce really requires no introduction, because she transcends a lot of things, just like all the celebrity chefs. They're the best that Sacramento and this state has to offer. Let's start out with Darrell's longtime good friend, Biba Caggiano.
I could tell you so many things with my accent thicker and thicker, but I am very emotional. I am so happy, so delighted that this tragedy turned into something so fabulous. I only want to tell you that when I came to Sacramento about 40 years ago, if the Corti brothers hadn't been around, I would have packed and gone some other place. Darrell, we love you, I love you, everybody loves you. Thank you.
Thank you, Biba. Another one of our great Sacramento institutions represented here, the Perigary chain. Kurt Spataro, when we called Kurt, he said, "I'll be there, and I'll be there with all my chefs." Kurt Spataro.
My hair would have looked better, but when I saw Biba, she shook my head, and it got all kind of messed up. But it was good to see her as well. Darrell is a great friend. He's been my neighbor for 15 years. And let me just say this, when you have a neighbor who makes their own caviar and stocks their wine cellar with the best champagne in the world, it's a good neighbor to have. He's a very, very good neighbor. But Darrell's also a mentor. He's been my mentor for 20 plus years. And I think everyone who sits behind me, he has been a mentor to them too. And this is really what we're talking about. This is a person who has impeccable judgment and education. And in his bones, he knows about food and wine.